In exactly 6 months, I'll be wearing a wedding dress that costs more than my house, promising to love forever a man I barely know, while 300 guests watch me pretend this is the happiest day of my life. Penelope, Penny. Hartwell swallowed hard as she stared at the cream envelope with the Blackwood golden crest stamped in the upper right corner. Her hands trembled so much she nearly dropped the cup of reheated coffee she held in the other hand. "Penny!" Her younger sister's shrill voice echoed through the tiny apartment kitchen. "There's a guy in a suit outside asking for you, and I swear he stepped out of a magazine." "What?" Penny frowned, still hypnotized by the envelope. "What guy?" Tall, dark, jawline that could cut glass, shoes that cost more than our rent. Daisy appeared in the kitchen doorway with wide eyes. "Penny, who the hell do you know that drives a Bentley?" Penny's stomach plummeted. She knew only one person who owned a black Bentley, and that person would never set foot in her neighborhood unless… No, it can't be. "Tell him I'm not here," she murmured, hiding the envelope behind her back. Too late, a male, velvety voice echoed through the small living room. "Hello, Penelope." Penny turned slowly, as if moving in slow motion, and there he was, Nathaniel Blackwood III, in all his intimidating glory. Even in the cramped space of her living room, he seemed to fill the entire environment, his impeccably tailored suit contrasting with the worn furniture and walls that urgently needed a fresh coat of paint. "How did you get into my house?" she managed to ask, though her voice sounded more like a squeak. "Your sister invited me in," he replied with a smile that didn't reach his ice-blue eyes. "Very hospitable, I must say." Daisy giggled nervously. "I can go… do something." "Anywhere that's not here," she whispered, quickly disappearing down the hallway. Penny and Nathaniel were alone, silence hanging between them like a lead curtain. He looked exactly the same as the last time she'd seen him, 3 months ago, when she still worked as an assistant at the law firm where he occasionally appeared for meetings. The same imposing presence, the same eyes that seemed capable of seeing through her most carefully constructed defenses. "I see you received my correspondence," he said, nodding toward the envelope she still hid. "I haven't opened it yet," she admitted, feeling ridiculous. "Then allow me to save you the trouble." Nathaniel took a step forward, and Penny instinctively stepped back until her back touched the kitchen counter. "I'm here to make you a marriage proposal." For a moment, Penny was sure she had heard wrong. "Excuse me? What?" "A marriage proposal," he repeated with the same naturalness with which he might have commented on the weather. "A mutually beneficial arrangement, of course. Nothing romantic or sentimental. Have you completely lost your mind?" The words left her mouth before she could stop them. To her surprise, Nathaniel smiled, a genuine smile this time, which completely transformed his austere face. "Probably," he admitted. "But hear my proposal before you send me away." "Nathaniel, I don't even like you," Penny said, crossing her arms. "And I'm sure the feeling is mutual." "Ah, but that's the beauty of the arrangement," he countered, his eyes gleaming with something she couldn't identify. "No emotional complications, just a clean business deal." "A business deal," she repeated slowly. "Involving marriage." "Exactly." Nathaniel adjusted his shirt cuffs, a gesture she remembered him making during tense meetings at the office. "I need a wife to satisfy certain family requirements related to my inheritance. You need financial security for your family." Penny's heart beat faster. How did he know about… "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, but her voice failed on the last word. "Penelope." His voice became softer, almost gentle. "I know about your mother's medical debts. I know about the second mortgage on the house. I know you have exactly 30 days before eviction." The words hit Penny like a punch to the stomach. She gripped the kitchen counter, feeling the world spin slightly. "How do you…" "I have resources," he said simply. "The question is, are you willing to accept my help?" "In exchange for what, exactly?" she asked, though she feared the answer. 6 months of marriage, occasional public appearances, a convincing performance of marital bliss for my family and the media, Nathaniel enumerated on his fingers. In return, all your family's debts will be paid off, your mother will receive the best medical treatment available, and you'll receive a substantial sum when we divorce. Penny stared at him, looking for any sign that this was an elaborate joke. But Nathaniel Blackwood wasn't known for his sense of humor. "You're serious," she murmured. "Completely serious." "Why?" The question came out as a whisper. "Why me?" For the first time since arriving, Nathaniel seemed to hesitate. His eyes looked away from hers for a fraction of a second before returning with renewed intensity. "Because you're one of the few people who doesn't want anything from me," he said finally. "And because I trust you'll fulfill your part of the agreement without unnecessary complications." "Unnecessary complications," Penny repeated, feeling a strange pang of what could have been offense. "Like feelings, you mean?" "Exactly." Penny closed her eyes, trying to process everything. Her mother was sick, needing expensive treatment that the health insurance refused to cover. Bills piled up on the kitchen table like a mountain of despair on paper. And now Nathaniel Blackwood, the most intimidating and inaccessible man she knew, was offering a solution to all her problems. The price? Just 6 months of her life pretending to be married to him. "I need to think," she said, opening her eyes to find him observing every micro-expression on her face. "Of course." Nathaniel took a card from his suit jacket's inner pocket and placed it on the counter next to her. "My personal number. You have until tomorrow at noon to decide." He headed to the door, but stopped before leaving, turning to look at her once more. "Penelope?" "Yes?" "For what it's worth, it won't be so terrible," he said, and for a moment, his mask of coldness slipped, revealing something more vulnerable underneath. "I promise." And then he was gone, leaving only the ghost of his expensive cologne and a business card that seemed to weigh a ton on the kitchen counter. Penny slid to the floor, leaning her back against the cabinets, and finally opened the envelope she still held. Inside was a 15-page prenuptial contract and a blank check with his signature. At the top of the first page, in elegant letters, was written, "Contractual marriage proposal, terms and conditions." She laughed. She had to laugh or she'd start crying, because as insane as it was, she already knew what her answer would be. "You're going to marry who?" Daisy almost choked on the cereal she was eating at breakfast. "It's complicated," Penny murmured, stirring her already cold coffee for the 10th time in 2 minutes. "Complicated? Penny, the guy is a billionaire." Daisy gestured dramatically with her spoon. "And you said you don't even like him." "I really don't like him," Penny confirmed, but her voice sounded less convincing than she intended. "It's just a business arrangement." "A business arrangement," Daisy repeated slowly. "Involving you walking down an aisle and promising to love, honor, and obey the Prince of Darkness." "He's not the Prince of Darkness," Penny protested. "Oh no. The man wears suits that cost more than our car, never really smiles, and has eyes that could freeze hell," Daisy enumerated on her fingers. "If that's not Prince of Darkness material, I don't know what is." Penny couldn't argue with that. Nathaniel Blackwood really did have a presence that suggested he could command legions from the shadows without breaking a sweat. "The important thing is that this solves all our problems," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Mom's debt, the house, everything. And what do you get besides 6 months of marriage to Count Dracula?" $1 million, Penny let slip. Daisy dropped her spoon on the plate with a clatter that echoed through the kitchen. $1 million. "When we get divorced," Penny added quickly. "And it's only for 6 months, Daisy. 6 months to ensure Mom gets the treatment she needs, and that you never have to worry about money again." Daisy's eyes filled with tears. "Penny, you can't sacrifice your life for us." "It's not a sacrifice," Penny lied with an ease that surprised her. "It's a business opportunity, simple as that." But as she dialed Nathaniel's number an hour later, her hands were shaking like leaves in the wind. "Blackwood." His voice was crisp and professional. "It's me," she said. and immediately felt stupid. Penny, Penelope Hartwell. Penelope. His voice became softer, almost warm. I assume you've made a decision. I accept. The words came out in a rush, as if she feared losing them if she took too long. I accept your proposal. There was silence on the other end of the line that lasted so long that Penny began to wonder if the call had dropped. Nathaniel. I'm here, he said finally. Are you sure? I am. She lied again, but this time with more conviction. Very well. My lawyer will contact you today to work out the legal details. We'll need to get married in 2 weeks.
2 weeks? Penny almost screamed. I thought we'd have more time to… To what? He interrupted. Change your mind? To get to know each other better? She suggested weakly. Nathaniel laughed, a low, rich sound that did something strange to her stomach. Penelope, this isn't a real marriage. We don't need to go through the whole dating ritual. We just need to convince other people that we're in love. In love, she repeated. Right, that shouldn't be difficult.
Irony doesn't suit you, he said, but she could hear the smile in his voice. I'll see you tonight to discuss the details. I'll send a car to pick you up at 7. Wait, tonight? But 7 o'clock, Penelope, he said firmly. Don't be late. And he hung up. Penny stared at the phone for a long moment, wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. At exactly 7 o'clock, a black Bentley stopped in front of her building. Penny went downstairs feeling ridiculous in the only decent dress she owned, a simple black number she had bought for job interviews. The driver, a middle-aged man with an impassive expression, opened the rear door for her. Good evening, Mrs. Hartwell. Mr. Blackwood awaits you at the restaurant. The restaurant turned out to be Le Bernardin, the kind of place where Penny could normally only afford sparkling water. She followed the maitre d' through the elegant dining room, feeling all eyes on her like spotlights. Nathaniel was seated at a private table in the back, and when he saw her approaching, he stood up. Today, he wasn't wearing a suit. Instead, a dark blue shirt that brought out his eyes, and dark pants that fit perfectly to his athletic silhouette. You look beautiful, he said, pulling out her chair. Thank you, Penny murmured, trying to ignore how the compliment made her blush. Wine? I'm going to need alcohol for this conversation, she admitted. Nathaniel smiled, another one of those rare smiles that completely transformed his face. Honesty. I like that about you. What else do you like about me? The question came out before she could censor it. For the purposes of our arrangement, of course. Nathaniel studied her for a moment, his blue eyes scanning her face in a way that made her feel like he could read her thoughts. You're intelligent, he said finally. More intelligent than you let on. You're loyal. You'd sacrifice anything for your family. And you have a sharp tongue when you're nervous. A sharp tongue doesn't sound like an attractive quality in a fake wife. But I don't want a submissive wife. Nathaniel leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. I want someone who can match me intellectually, someone who doesn't intimidate easily. And you think I don't intimidate easily? Penny laughed. Nathaniel, you terrify me. Good, he said softly. Terror keeps things interesting. The sommelier arrived with the wine, and Penny took advantage of the distraction to try to control her heartbeat. There was something about the way Nathaniel looked at her, the way his voice deepened when he spoke to her, that made her forget this was just business. So, she said after they were alone again, tell me about these family requirements that require a wife. Nathaniel's expression closed off instantly. It's complicated. Everything in your life seems to be complicated, Penny observed. Try to simplify it for me. Nathaniel took a sip of wine before answering. My grandfather left a clause in his will. To receive my full inheritance, I must be married before I turn 35. And how old are you? 34, he said dryly. My birthday's in 6 months. Ah, Penny did the math. Hence the 6 months of marriage. Exactly. After my birthday, we can divorce civilly. And if, Penny hesitated, and if we develop real feelings for each other during those 6 months? Nathaniel stared at her as if she had asked about the possibility of growing wings. That won't happen, he said with such certainty that it hurt a little. How can you be so sure? Because I don't fall in love, Penelope. His voice was cold, definitive. And you're too smart to fall in love with someone like me. Someone like you? Someone incapable of love, he said simply. Penny studied him, looking for any sign of vulnerability behind the cold mask. For a moment she thought she saw something, a shadow of pain perhaps, but it disappeared so quickly she might have imagined it. Well, she said finally, raising her glass, then let's toast to our perfectly loveless union. To our perfectly loveless union, Nathaniel repeated, touching his glass to hers. But as they drank, Penny couldn't help but notice that his eyes remained on hers a little longer than necessary. And for the first time since accepting the proposal, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, those 6 months might not be as simple as she had imagined. Absolutely not, Penny declared, staring at the wedding dress that cost more than her college education. I look like an exploded wedding cake doll. The boutique consultant, a woman named Vivienne, who spoke with a suspiciously French accent, sighed dramatically. Mademoiselle, you must embrace your femininity. This Vera Wang is a masterpiece. This masterpiece has enough ruffles to house a small family, Penny retorted, trying to free herself from the layers of tulle that seemed to have a life of their own. Penny's right. A familiar voice echoed through the boutique. She looks like a giant meringue. Penny turned on the pedestal and almost tripped in the 4-inch heels that Vivienne had insisted she try on. Nathaniel was standing at the store entrance, impeccable in a gray suit, with an expression she couldn't decipher. "What are you doing here?" she asked, feeling her cheeks flush. "Men aren't supposed to see the wedding dress before the wedding." "Superstitions don't apply to contractual marriages," he replied, but there was something softer in his voice. "Besides, I need to make sure you won't look ridiculous in the photos that will appear in every society magazine." "Thank you for the touching concern about my appearance," Penny said dryly. Nathaniel approached the pedestal, and Penny had to tilt her head back to look him in the eyes. "Actually," he said, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone, "you look beautiful in anything. The problem is that this dress isn't you." Penny's heart did a somersault. "Stop it," she ordered herself. "He's just performing for the consultant." "And what exactly is me?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Nathaniel's eyes roamed her face, as if he were memorizing every detail. "Simple, elegant, classic," he murmured. "You don't need frills to be stunning." Vivienne cleared her throat loudly. "Monsieur, with all due respect, you have the wedding in 1 week. There's no time to find another dress." "There's time," Nathaniel said without taking his eyes off Penny. "We'll cancel this one and find something that truly suits her." "Nathaniel," Penny whispered, "this will cost a fortune." "Leave that to me," he interrupted, extending his hand to help her down from the pedestal. "We have more important things to discuss." 20 minutes later, they were sitting in a small cafe, away from the chaos of the boutique. Penny had traded the tulle monster for jeans and a simple blouse, and felt infinitely more like herself. "Thank you," she said, stirring sugar into her coffee, "for getting me out of that situation." "You don't need to thank me," Nathaniel replied. "I can't have my bride looking uncomfortable at her own wedding." "Your fake bride," she corrected. "Right," he agreed, but seemed to hesitate for a moment. "Penny, we need to talk about how we're going to sell this charade." "Sell the charade?" "My family isn't made up of idiots," Nathaniel explained, leaning forward. "They'll watch us like hawks looking for signs that our relationship isn't real." "And what kind of signs would those be?" "Body language, the way we interact. Whether we know personal details about each other," he enumerated. "We need to be convincing." Penny swallowed hard. "Convincing how?" "Like a couple that's desperately in love," Nathaniel said simply. "Ah, that..." Penny laughed nervously. Small detail. I've never been desperately in love with anyone. I have no idea what that looks like. Nathaniel studied her with a strange expression. Never? Never, she confirmed, feeling pathetic. And you? No, he replied quickly. But I've observed enough to know how to imitate it. All right then, Professor Blackwood, Penny said, trying to inject lightness into the situation. Teach me how to pretend to be madly in love with you. Something flashed in Nathaniel's eyes. Something that seemed almost hurt. First, he said, his voice returning to a professional tone. Physical contact. Couples in love touch constantly. Hands, arms, faces. To demonstrate, he reached out and lightly touched hers on the table. The touch was gentle, almost casual, but sent an electric current up Penny's arm. Like this? She asked, her voice coming out more husky than intended. Exactly like that, he murmured, his fingers tracing small circles on the back of her hand. We also need to work on eye contact. Eye contact? Look at me, he instructed softly. Penny raised her eyes to meet his, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. There was something in the way he looked at her, as if she were the only person in the world. Couples in love look at each other as if they can't believe their luck, Nathaniel said, his voice low and hypnotic, as if the other person were a miracle. Like you're looking at me now? Penny whispered. For a moment, Nathaniel seemed to lose his composure. His eyes intensified, and Penny had the crazy feeling that he was no longer pretending. Yes, his voice rough, exactly like that. They stayed like that for a moment that stretched like eternity, until loud laughter from the... Nathaniel pulled away quickly, releasing her hand. We also need to synchronize, returning to business tone. How we met, how we fell in love, when we decided to get married. Right, Penny agreed, trying to ignore how her hand still tingled where he had touched it. What's our story? We met at the law firm where you worked. I was intrigued by your intelligence and determination. You were intrigued by my irresistible charm. Penny almost choked on her coffee. Your irresistible charm? Do you have a better suggestion? How about your impressive modesty? Nathaniel smiled, a genuine smile that made her stomach do flips. I prefer irresistible charm, he said. Continuing, we started meeting for coffee after work. Long conversations about literature, art, life. We discovered we had more in common than we imagined. And do we? Penny asked. Have things in common? We'll find out, Nathaniel replied. What's your favorite book? Pride and Prejudice, she answered without hesitation. Of course it is, he murmured, but he was smiling. Let me guess. You identify with Elizabeth Bennet. And you identify with Darcy, Penny shot back. Rich, arrogant, thinks he can buy everything he wants. Darcy wasn't arrogant, Nathaniel protested. He was misunderstood. Ah, so you do identify with him, Penny said, smiling. Maybe, Nathaniel admitted. And like Darcy, I can change. Is that a reference to the book or a personal confession? Nathaniel stared at her for a long moment. Maybe both. His phone rang, breaking the intimate moment. He checked the screen and sighed. I need to answer this. It's my sister, he said, standing up. Charlotte wants to meet you before the wedding. You have a sister? Penny asked, realizing how much she still didn't know about the man she would marry in a week. Charlotte is, complicated, Nathaniel said. But she's important to me. If she doesn't believe in us, this whole charade falls apart. As he walked away to take the call, Penny watched his tense posture, the way his jaw tightened when he spoke with his sister. For the first time, she wondered if maybe Nathaniel wasn't as invulnerable as he pretended to be. And for the first time, she really wanted to discover what kind of man was hiding behind all that carefully constructed armor. This is dangerous, she thought. Very dangerous. But as she watched Nathaniel gesturing during the phone conversation, his serious expression softening slightly when talking about his sister, Penny discovered that maybe she didn't care so much about the danger. After all, it was only 6 months. What could go wrong? She's going to hate me, Penny murmured for the 5th time in 10 minutes, smoothing down the navy blue dress that Nathaniel had insisted on buying for her. Charlotte won't hate you, Nathaniel replied, but there was a tension in his voice that didn't reassure her one bit. She just questions my choices. What choices? All of them, he said dryly, parking the car in front of an elegant brownstone in the Upper East Side. Especially those related to women. Penny turned to face him. How many women have you brought to meet your sister? None, Nathaniel admitted, avoiding her gaze. That's why she's suspicious. Wait, none? Penny felt a strange pang of something she didn't want to identify. In your entire life? There was never a need, he said, finally looking at her. My previous relationships were casual. Casual, she repeated. Mutually convenient arrangements, Nathaniel clarified. Nothing that warranted family introductions. And now you're bringing your fake fiancé to meet your sister, Penny sighed. This couldn't possibly go wrong in any way. Nathaniel leaned toward her, his eyes serious. Penny, I need you to understand. Charlotte means everything to me. She's the only family I care about. If she doesn't believe in us, your entire inheritance goes down the drain, Penny finished. I get it. It's not about the money, he said softly. It's about proving I can be the man my grandfather wanted me to be. There was something in the way he said it, a raw vulnerability that made Penny's heart squeeze. And what kind of man was that? Someone capable of love, Nathaniel replied simply. Before Penny could fully process that answer, the house door opened, and a stunning blonde woman appeared on the steps. Showtime, Nathaniel murmured, getting out of the car. Charlotte Blackwood was everything Penny had imagined, and worse. Elegant, sophisticated, with the same piercing blue eyes as Nathaniel, but with a smile that didn't come close to reaching her eyes. So this is the mysterious bride, Charlotte said, looking Penny up and down as if she were a product she might or might not buy. How interesting. Charlotte, this is Penelope, Nathaniel said, placing his hand protectively on Penny's back. Penny, my sister, Charlotte. A pleasure to meet you, Penny said, extending her hand. Charlotte ignored it completely. Nathaniel, darling, can we talk for a moment? Alone? Anything you have to say can be said in front of Penny, Nathaniel replied firmly. Oh, how sweet, Charlotte said, but her tone was icy. Conjugal protection already beginning. How convenient. Penny felt like she'd been slapped. Convenient. The word echoed in her mind like a funeral bell. Charlotte. Nathaniel's voice carried a warning tone. What? Charlotte spread her arms in an innocent gesture. I'm just curious about this lightning romance. I mean, 3 months ago you swore marriage was an antiquated institution and now… People change, Nathaniel interrupted. People change, Charlotte repeated, her eyes fixing on Penny. Or they find compelling financial motivations. Penny's blood boiled. Excuse me? Oh dear, don't take it personally, Charlotte said with a poisonous smile. It's just that my brother has a tendency to attract opportunists. Charlotte, enough, Nathaniel said, his voice low and dangerous. But Penny had already had enough. She stepped forward, looking Charlotte directly in the eyes. You're right, she said calmly. I am an opportunist, but not in the way you think. Charlotte raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? Yes, Penny continued, feeling Nathaniel tense beside her. I saw an opportunity to be with a man who is intelligent, successful, and against all odds manages to be kind when he wants to be. A man who cares deeply about family, even when that family treats him like garbage. Penny, Nathaniel murmured. No, let me finish, she said, not taking her eyes off Charlotte. You want to know if I'm with your brother for money. The answer is yes, but not in the way you imagine. I'm with him because he's the kind of man who would use his wealth to help someone he barely knows. Because he's the type of person who notices when someone is uncomfortable and does something to remedy the situation. That, Charlotte, is worth more than all the diamonds in the world. Charlotte remained silent for a long moment, studying Penny with an expression she couldn't decipher. Interesting, she said finally. And you, Nathaniel? What do you see in her? Penny turned to look at Nathaniel, expecting him to recite the story they had rehearsed. Instead, he looked at her as if he were seeing her for the first time. She's brave, he said softly. Braver than anyone I know. She'd sacrifice anything for her family, and she has a way of making me remember who I want to be. Penny's heart stopped. There was something in the way he said it, in the intensity in his eyes, that made her forget this was just a performance. And she makes me laugh, Nathaniel added, a genuine smile curving his lips. Something I haven't done in a long time. How romantic, Charlotte said, but her voice had lost its sarcastic tone. And when exactly did you fall in love? Penny and Nathaniel looked at each other. They hadn't rehearsed this part. It was gradual, Penny said slowly. Like falling in love with a sunrise. You don't realize it's happening until you're completely immersed in the light. Nathaniel stared at her, something indefinable passing through his eyes. For me it was more sudden, he said, his voice rough. Like being struck by lightning. One moment I was fine alone and the next. The next? Charlotte prompted. The next I couldn't imagine my life without her. Nathaniel finished, not taking his eyes off Penny. The silence that followed was broken by Charlotte clapping slowly. Bravo, she said. Really bravo. For a moment I almost believed you. Charlotte, Nathaniel began, but she raised her hand. No, Nathaniel, you're good. Very good. But I've known you since you were born. She walked up to them, stopping right in front of Penny. And I know when you're pretending. Penny's heart plummeted. It's over. We've been found out. But, Charlotte continued, surprising them both, I also know when you're not pretending. What does that mean? Nathaniel asked. Charlotte smiled, the first genuine smile of the evening. It means that maybe you started out pretending, she said, but you're not anymore. Penny felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. You look at each other like you're about to devour one another, Charlotte observed with amusement. And Nathaniel, you haven't stopped touching her since you arrived here. Penny looked down and realized it was true. Nathaniel's hand was on her back, his fingers tracing unconscious circles through the fabric of her dress. Charlotte, you're... Right? Charlotte interrupted. I always am. It's my superpower. She headed to the door, then stopped and turned around. For your information, I like her, she said to Nathaniel. Finally, someone who isn't afraid of you. I am afraid of him, Penny murmured. No, dear, Charlotte smiled. You're afraid of what he makes you feel. There's a huge difference. And with that, she went into the house, leaving Penny and Nathaniel alone on the sidewalk. So, Penny said finally, her voice trembling, I guess we passed the test. Yes, Nathaniel agreed, but his voice sounded distant. We passed. They stood there for a moment, neither moving to leave. Nathaniel? Yes? What you said in there, about not being able to imagine your life without me. It was for Charlotte, he said quickly, but didn't look her in the eyes. Right, Penny whispered. For Charlotte. But as they walked back to the car in silence, Penny couldn't help but wonder if Charlotte was right. Maybe they had started out pretending. But what if they weren't anymore? And even more frightening, what if she didn't care? I can't do this, Penny whispered to her reflection in the mirror, her hands trembling as she tried to put on the pearl earrings that had belonged to Nathaniel's grandmother. I can't marry him. You can and you will, Daisy said firmly, appearing behind her in the mirror. Because in 2 hours, 200 people will be waiting to see you walk down that aisle. 200 people who will witness the biggest lie of my life, Penny groaned. Hey! Daisy gripped her sister's shoulders and forced her to turn around. Look at me. Mom is in the front row, pain-free for the first time in months, thanks to the treatment he paid for. Our house is saved. You're wearing a dress that costs more than a car, and the man waiting for you at the altar looks at you like you're a miracle. He's pretending, Daisy. No, he's not, a familiar voice said from the doorway. They both turned to find Charlotte standing there, elegant, in an emerald green dress, holding a bouquet of white orchids. What are you doing here? Penny asked, surprised. Delivering the bride's bouquet, Charlotte replied, extending the flowers, and telling some necessary truths. Charlotte, my brother has been at the altar for 20 minutes, Charlotte interrupted. 20 minutes, Penny. Nathaniel doesn't wait for anyone. He's rescheduled important meetings for being 3 minutes late. But he's there, checking his watch and adjusting his tie for the 10th time. Penny felt something tighten in her chest. Is he nervous? He's terrified, Charlotte said with a smile. And do you know why? Because for the first time in his life, he has something to lose that really matters. But this is just a contract. Penny, Charlotte approached, her expression serious. I may have grown up with Nathaniel, but you've changed him in 6 weeks in ways I couldn't in 34 years. He smiles now. He smiles for real. And yesterday, I caught him buying flowers for your mother at the hospital. He did what? Said they were part of the performance. Charlotte laughed. But no one performs for an unconscious woman, dear. Daisy beamed. I like this woman. And I need to go check if my brother hasn't fainted. Charlotte headed to the door, but stopped. Oh, and Penny? The dress looks perfect on you. Penny looked down. The dress Nathaniel had chosen was simple but stunning. Creamy silk that flowed like water, elegant neckline, nothing extravagant. It was exactly what she would have chosen if she'd had the courage to dream that high. 5 minutes, someone shouted from the hallway. It's now or never, Daisy said, adjusting Penny's veil. Are you ready? Penny took a deep breath, looking at herself in the mirror one more time. The woman staring back looked confident, radiant, in love. In love. The word hit her like lightning. When exactly had she stopped pretending? Yes, she whispered. I'm ready. The music began, and Penny felt like she was floating down the church aisle. The faces in the congregation passed in a blur, but she only had eyes for the man waiting at the altar. Nathaniel looked impeccable in a black tuxedo, but it was his expression that made her stumble slightly. He looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, as if he couldn't believe his luck. He's just performing, she tried to remind herself. Remember? Performance for the cameras. But when she reached the altar and he extended his hand to her, when their fingers intertwined and he whispered, "You're breathtaking," it didn't feel like performance. It felt real. Dearly beloved, the priest began, we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of Nathaniel and Penelope in holy matrimony. The words seemed to come from far away. Penny was lost in Nathaniel's blue eyes, in the way his thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. If anyone has any reason why these two should not be joined in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. Penny held her breath. This is the moment, she thought. Someone will stand up and expose the whole charade. But the silence remained. Nathaniel, the priest continued, do you take Penelope to be your lawfully wedded wife? Do you promise to love her, honor her, and protect her, in sickness and in health, in wealth and in poverty, all the days of your life? Nathaniel didn't hesitate for even a second. I do, he said, his voice clear and firm. And you, Penelope, do you take Nathaniel to be your lawfully wedded husband? Do you promise to love him, honor him, and protect him, in sickness and in health, in wealth and in poverty, all the days of your life? Penny looked into Nathaniel's eyes and saw something that made her completely forget this was a charade. She saw vulnerability, hope, and something that looked dangerously like, "I do," she whispered. "The rings, please." Charlotte approached with the rings, winking at Penny when she handed her hers. "With this ring," Nathaniel said, sliding the golden band onto Penny's finger, "I thee wed. With my body I thee worship. With my worldly goods I thee endow. In the sight of God I promise you my love." His voice faltered slightly on the last word, and Penny felt tears forming in her eyes. Her hands trembled when it was her turn. "With this ring," she managed to say, "I thee wed. With my body I thee worship. With my worldly goods I thee endow. In the sight of God I promise you my love. Love." The word echoed between them like a confession. "By the power vested in me," the priest smiled broadly, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Nathaniel, you may kiss the bride." This was the moment Penny had most feared. They had discussed this. It would just be a quick, chaste kiss for the cameras. But when Nathaniel leaned toward her, when his hands touched her face with a gentleness that surprised her, when their lips met, the world disappeared. The kiss was soft at first, hesitant, as if they were asking permission from each other. But then Penny leaned closer, her hands moving to his tuxedo lapel, and Nathaniel deepened the kiss until she forgot where she was, forgot about the cameras, forgot about everything except the sensation of being in his arms. When they finally separated, both were breathless. Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "My wife," he murmured, so low that only she could hear. "My husband," she replied, and the words came out more naturally than she had ever imagined. The congregation erupted in applause, but Penny barely noticed. She was lost in Nathaniel's smile, a smile so radiant it made her momentarily forget that none of this was real. But as they walked down the aisle as husband and wife, waving to the guests, Penny couldn't help but wonder, if it was all pretense, why did it feel like the truest thing she had ever experienced? And why, when Nathaniel whispered, "We did it," in her ear, did it sound more like a promise than a declaration of victory? At the reception, as they danced the opening waltz, Nathaniel pulled her closer. "How do you feel, Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, his lips dangerously close to her ear. "Like an imposter," she admitted. "You're not an imposter," he said firmly. "You're my wife." "For 6 months," she reminded, but her voice sounded less convincing than intended. Nathaniel stopped dancing, looking directly into her eyes. "Penny, about that." "What? What if—" he began, but was interrupted by someone tapping the microphone. "Attention, everyone," Charlotte announced. "Time for the Maid of Honor's speech." Nathaniel sighed, and the moment passed. But Penny couldn't help but wonder what he was about to say. What if what? "Where's the couch?" Penny asked, standing in the doorway of what was clearly a bedroom with a single king-size bed dominating the space. "What couch?" Nathaniel replied, placing her suitcase on the floor next to the dresser. "The couch where one of us should sleep," she clarified, trying to ignore the fact that he had removed his jacket and was unbuttoning his shirt cuffs. "Remember, fake marriage, clearly established boundaries." Nathaniel stopped fiddling with his shirt and turned to her with an amused expression. "Penny, we're adults. We can share a bed without it meaning anything." "Right," she said, but her voice sounded higher than normal. "Of course. Totally platonic. Like roommates." "Exactly," he agreed. But there was something in his eyes that made her doubt her own ability to keep things platonic, especially when he started removing his tie with slow, deliberate movements. "I'm going to change clothes," she murmured, grabbing her suitcase and rushing to the bathroom. 15 minutes later, Penny emerged wearing a pink cotton nightgown that her mother had insisted on buying for the honeymoon. It was modest, covering everything it should cover, but somehow felt inappropriately intimate considering the circumstances. Nathaniel was lying on the bed, wearing only black pajama pants, reading a book. When he saw her, his eyes fixed on her for a moment too long before quickly returning to the pages. Pride and Prejudice, Penny noticed, trying to keep her voice casual as she approached the left side of the bed. I thought I'd reread it, he replied without looking at her, to make sure I understand the Darcy-Elizabeth dynamic you mentioned. And what's your verdict? Nathaniel closed the book and stared at her. I think Darcy was an idiot for taking so long to recognize what was right in front of him. There was something in the way he said it, in the intensity of his gaze that made Penny's heart race dangerously. And Elizabeth? She asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Elizabeth was too stubborn to admit her first impressions were wrong, he replied, placing the book on the nightstand. But when she finally admitted it, it changed everything. The silence that followed was charged with tension. Penny lay down, maintaining a respectful distance between them, but was painfully aware of every movement he made. Nathaniel? What were you going to say today? During the dance? When Charlotte interrupted? He was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. It doesn't matter, he said finally. It was nonsense. Tell me the nonsense. Nathaniel turned on his side to face her, and even in the room's dim light she could see the intensity in his eyes. I was going to ask if you'd ever considered that maybe we don't want to get divorced in 6 months. Penny's heart stopped. Nathaniel. I said it was nonsense, he interrupted quickly. Ignore it. What if I don't want to ignore it? The question hung in the air between them like a confession. Penny, his voice was hoarse. You don't know what you're saying. Don't I? She turned to face him completely. Nathaniel, today when you kissed me, it was for the cameras, he said, but his voice wasn't convincing. Was it? She whispered, leaning slightly toward him. Because it didn't feel like it. Penny, stop. Stop what? Stop looking at me like that. Like what? Like you want me, he said, his voice so low she almost didn't hear it. What if I do? What happened next was so fast that Penny barely had time to process it. One moment they were talking, and the next, Nathaniel was above her, his hands on either side of her face, his eyes burning into hers. You don't want me, he said, his breath hot against her face. You want the fantasy, the rich man who solves all your problems. But I'm not a fairy tale, Penny. I'm complicated, controlling, and I have limited capacity for the kind of love you deserve. And who decides what I deserve? She challenged, her hands moving to his chest. You. Someone has to be sensible here. Maybe I'm tired of being sensible, she murmured, her fingers tracing the contours of his chest muscles. Maybe for once in my life I want to do something just because I want to. Nathaniel closed his eyes, as if he were in pain. Penny, if we do this, it changes everything. What if I want everything to change? He opened his eyes, and what she saw there made her stop breathing. Desire, yes, but also vulnerability, fear, and something that looked very much like, "Don't play with me," he whispered. Not about this. In response, Penny lifted her head and touched her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative, a question rather than a demand. Nathaniel remained still for a moment that seemed eternal. Then, with a low groan that came from deep in his throat, he deepened the kiss until Penny forgot her own name. When they finally separated, both were breathless. This is madness, he murmured against her lips. Total madness, she agreed, pulling him into another kiss. Penny woke to sunlight filtering through the curtains and Nathaniel's arm around her waist. For a moment, she just lay there, absorbing the sensation of being in his arms, listening to his steady breathing. Then reality hit her like a bucket of cold water. What did we do? Carefully, trying not to wake him, she got up from the bed. Nathaniel murmured something in his sleep and turned over but didn't wake up. Penny dressed quickly and escaped to the kitchen, desperately needing coffee and a moment to think. We changed everything, she thought, remembering his words. Now what? Good morning. Nathaniel's voice made her turn around. He was standing in the kitchen entrance, wearing only jeans, his hair messy from sleep. He looked different, younger, more accessible. "Good morning," she replied, trying to keep her voice casual. "Coffee?" "Please." He approached, but stopped at a respectful distance. "Penny, about last night." "It was a mistake," she said quickly, not wanting to hear him say it first. "We let the emotion of the wedding carry us away. It won't happen again." Nathaniel's expression closed off instantly. "Of course," he said, his voice returning to its professional, cold tone. "A mistake. I understand perfectly." He took the coffee cup she offered, being careful not to touch her fingers. "I have some meetings today," he said. "You'll be fine alone?" "Perfectly fine," she lied. "Great." He headed to the door but stopped. "Penny?" "Yes?" "We forget this happened. We go back to the original arrangement, okay?" It wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. But she nodded anyway. "Sure, back to the original arrangement." After he left, Penny sat at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands. "Idiot," she thought. "You went and fell in love with him. And judging by his reaction, that was the last thing he wanted." The phone rang, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Hello? Mrs. Blackwood?" A polite female voice said. "This is Janet, Mr. Blackwood's assistant. He asked me to call and inform you that there will be a charity event on Friday night. Your presence is required." "Required," Penny repeated. "As his wife, of course," Janet clarified. "I'll send the details by email." After she hung up, Penny laughed bitterly. Back to the original arrangement, she thought. Right. But if Nathaniel thought it would be easy to pretend last night hadn't happened, he was very wrong. After all, she could still taste him on her lips. Wow. Daisy sighed, watching Penny descend the stairs of the apartment Nathaniel had rented for her. "You look dangerous." Penny checked her reflection in the hall mirror. The red dress she had chosen for the charity event was anything but modest. Generous neckline, a cut that accentuated every curve, a slit that went up to her thigh. Completely different from anything she would normally wear. "That's the point," she murmured, applying another layer of dark red lipstick. "Penny, what are you plotting?" "Absolutely nothing," Penny lied, grabbing her small clutch. "Just fulfilling my conjugal duties." "Your conjugal duties don't involve looking like a femme fatale from a film noir." "Maybe they should," Penny replied, checking the diamond earrings borrowed from Charlotte. "Nathaniel wants to pretend our night together didn't happen?" "Perfect. Let's see how he handles pretending when I'm wearing this dress." "You're going to torture the man," Daisy observed, but she was smiling. "I'm not going to torture anyone," Penny protested. "I'm just going to—" Remind him of what he's trying to forget. The intercom buzzed, interrupting the conversation. "Mrs. Blackwood?" The driver's voice echoed through the apartment. "Your husband is waiting for you in the car." "Showtime," Penny murmured, grabbing the fur coat Charlotte had insisted on lending her. Nathaniel was checking messages on his phone when she got into the Bentley, but when he looked up and saw her, the device slipped from his hands. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, his eyes traveling over every inch of the red dress. "Good evening to you too, dear husband," Penny said sweetly, adjusting her skirt so the slit revealed even more leg. Nathaniel swallowed visibly. "That dress is new? Like it?" she asked with feigned innocence, leaning slightly forward to adjust her shoe strap, which gave him an even better view of her neckline. "It's appropriate for the event," he managed to say, but his voice was hoarse. "Appropriate," she repeated, pretending to be hurt. "How romantic of you." "Penny, what are you doing?" "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied, but there was a small curve to her lips that belied her innocence. Throughout the entire ride to the hotel, Penny could feel Nathaniel's eyes on her. Every time she moved, every time she crossed her legs or adjusted her hair, She could see him struggling to maintain his composure. Good, she thought. Let him struggle. The Plaza's ballroom was filled with New York's elite, politicians, CEOs, celebrities, all dressed in their finest for the annual Blackwood Foundation charity event. Remember, Nathaniel murmured in her ear as they entered, we need to appear united, happy. Oh, I remember, Penny replied, placing her hand on his arm and pressing against him more than necessary. Don't worry, darling. I'll be the perfect wife. The way she said perfect made something contract in Nathaniel's stomach. They hadn't taken 3 steps into the ballroom when they were approached by a middle-aged man with an oily smile. Nathaniel, the man exclaimed, and this must be the famous wife, Richard Harrison, from the Times. Penelope Blackwood. Penny introduced herself, extending her hand gracefully. A pleasure, my dear. Richard kissed her hand, lingering longer than necessary. I must say, Nathaniel, you're a very lucky man. Without a doubt, Nathaniel replied, but there was tension in his voice. And tell me, Mrs. Blackwood, Richard continued, still holding her hand, how has the adjustment to married life been? Wonderful, Penny replied, pressing against Nathaniel's side. Nathaniel is intense in everything he does. Very passionate. Nathaniel almost choked on his champagne. How delightful. Richard smiled. And do you plan to have children soon? Oh, we're practicing quite a lot, Penny said with an innocent smile that didn't match her words at all. Aren't we, darling? Nathaniel pulled her closer, his fingers digging into her waist. If you'll excuse us, he said through gritted teeth. I need to steal my wife for a dance. Of course, Richard waved. Have fun, lovebirds. Nathaniel practically dragged Penny onto the dance floor. What the hell are you doing? He whispered as they began to dance. Performing, she replied innocently. Isn't that what you wanted? For us to pretend to be happily married? Pretending to be happy doesn't include suggesting we have sex like rabbits, he hissed in her ear. Who's suggesting? Penny tilted her head, feigning confusion. I just said you're passionate. If people's minds go elsewhere, that's not my problem. The music changed to something slower, and Nathaniel pulled her closer. Much closer. Penny. His voice was low, dangerous. You're playing with fire. Am I? She whispered, her lips dangerously close to his ear. And what are you going to do about it? In response, Nathaniel spun her and dipped her, holding her in the position for a moment longer than necessary. When he brought her back up, their faces were inches apart. Two can play this game, he murmured. And then, to Penny's complete surprise, he kissed the curve of her neck, just below her ear. The touch was soft, almost tender, but sent waves of heat directly to places she didn't want to think about. Nathaniel, she whispered, her breath failing. He murmured against her skin, kissing another sensitive spot. People are watching. Let them watch, he said, his hands moving to her bare back. We're newlyweds. It's expected that we can't keep our hands off each other. But there was something in his voice, in the way his hands touched her, that had nothing to do with performance. Are you trying to prove a point to me? She asked, trying to maintain control. Maybe, he admitted, nibbling lightly on her earlobe. Or maybe I just realized I can play your game better than you can. My game. Seduction, he said simply. You think you know me, Penny. You think you can manipulate me with that dress, with those casual touches, with your double-meaning comments. I don't know what you're talking about, she lied, but her voice was shaky. Don't you? Nathaniel smiled against her skin. Then let me clarify. You want to remind me of the night we spent together. You want to make me admit I can't forget you. You want to break me. Penny tried to pull away, but he kept her trapped in his arms. And you know what? He continued, his voice low and hypnotic. It's working, because I couldn't forget you. Not for a second. Penny's heart stopped. Nathaniel. I lied when I said it was a mistake. he confessed, his eyes burning into hers. It was the most right thing I've ever done. And if you think you can torture me by wearing that dress and touching me like nothing has changed, you're wrong. Then what do you want? She whispered. You, he said simply. I want you. Not as part of a contract, not as a performance. I want you because I'm crazy about you. The music stopped, but they remained standing in the middle of the dance floor, lost in each other. But what about the agreement? Penny asked. What about the 6 months? Screw the agreement, Nathaniel said fiercely. And screw the 6 months. I want forever, Penny. I want it for real. Nathaniel, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, a voice interrupted, and they quickly separated to find a photographer smiling at them. How beautiful. Can you look this way? For Vogue. They posed automatically, perfect smiles in place, but Penny could barely process what had just happened. Nathaniel had just said he wanted her forever. And for the first time since accepting his proposal, she really believed that maybe, just maybe, this impossible fairy tale could have a happy ending. But first, they needed to survive the rest of the night without exploding from sexual tension in the middle of the Plaza Hotel. This is going to be interesting, she thought, watching the way Nathaniel looked at her as if he wanted to carry her out of there immediately. Very interesting. The ride home from the plaza was torture. Pure, exquisite torture. Nathaniel sat as far away from Penny as the Bentley's back seat would allow, his hands clenched into fists, his jaw so tight she could see the muscle jumping. Every few seconds, his eyes would drift to her legs, visible through the slit in her red dress, then snap away as if he'd been burned. You're very quiet, Penny observed, deliberately crossing her legs so the fabric shifted higher. I'm trying to behave like a gentleman, he said through gritted teeth. What if I don't want you to behave like a gentleman? Nathaniel's head snapped toward her, his eyes dark with desire and something much deeper. Penny, don't. Don't what? She asked innocently, sliding closer to him on the leather seat. Don't tell you that I've been thinking about our wedding night every second since it happened. Don't tell you that when you said you wanted forever. My heart nearly exploded. Don't tell you that I'm tired of pretending I don't love you. The car came to a stop at a red light, and in the sudden stillness, her words hung between them like a challenge. You love me. Nathaniel's voice was barely a whisper. Desperately, she admitted, her hand finding his. Completely. Hopelessly. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you walked into my tiny kitchen and made that ridiculous proposal. Penny. His fingers intertwined with hers, trembling slightly. I know you think you're not capable of love, she continued, her thumb tracing circles on his palm. But the man who bought flowers for my unconscious mother, who chose the perfect wedding dress because he knew what would make me feel beautiful, who looks at me like I'm a miracle, that man is very much capable of love. Nathaniel stared at her for a long moment, something raw and vulnerable flickering across his features. I've never been in love before, he said finally. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. Penny smiled, reaching up to touch his face. We'll figure it out together. The car began moving again, and Nathaniel leaned into her touch, his eyes closing. When we get home, he said, his voice rough with emotion and desire, I'm going to make love to my wife. My real wife. Not because of a contract, not because we're pretending, but because I love her more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. Penny's breath caught. Nathaniel. And then, he continued, opening his eyes to look directly into hers, I'm going to burn that damn contract and ask her to marry me for real, with a real proposal, a real ring, and a real promise of forever. What makes you think she'll say yes? Penny asked, though she was already crying happy tears. Because, Nathaniel leaned closer, his lips brushing against her ear. She just told me she loves me desperately, completely, and hopelessly. And I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure she never regrets it. They barely made it through the front door. The moment it closed behind them, Nathaniel pressed Penny against it, his mouth finding hers with a hunger that made her knees weak. This wasn't like their tentative first kiss, or even their passionate wedding kiss. This was desperation and love, and 6 weeks of suppressed desire, all rolled into one earth-shattering moment. "I love you," he murmured against her lips between kisses. "God, Penny, I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good," she gasped, her hands tugging at his bow tie. "Terror keeps things interesting, remember?" He laughed against her mouth, the sound rich and warm and completely unguarded. "You're going to be the death of me, Mrs. Blackwood." "Promises, promises." She smiled, finally succeeding in loosening his tie. Later, much later, they lay tangled together in their bed. Their bed, not the bed from their contract, but the bed they would share as husband and wife, as lovers, as partners in the beautiful chaos of real love. Penny traced lazy patterns on Nathaniel's bare chest, still marveling at the fact that this was real, that they were real. "So," she said, propping herself up on her elbow to look at him. "What happens now?" "Now," Nathaniel said, pulling her closer. "I keep my promise. We burn the contract I propose properly, and we start planning our real life together." "Our real life," Penny repeated, loving the sound of it. "What does that look like?" Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, his fingers playing with her hair. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've never planned a real life with someone before, but I think it looks like morning coffee together and stolen kisses in the kitchen. It looks like you telling me when I'm being an arrogant ass, and me telling you how beautiful you are every single day. It looks like family dinners with Daisy and your mother, and Charlotte teaching our future children how to be properly sarcastic." "Future children?" Penny raised an eyebrow. "Too soon?" Nathaniel asked, suddenly uncertain. "Not soon enough," she whispered, kissing him softly. "I want it all with you, Nathaniel, the whole beautiful, messy, real life. Even though I'm complicated and controlling, especially because you're complicated and controlling," she grinned. "Someone has to keep you humble." "I love you, Penelope Blackwood," he said, rolling her over so he was looking down at her. "I love your courage and your loyalty and your sharp tongue. I love the way you defend the people you care about, and the way you make me want to be better than I am. I love that you chose me, even when you thought I was incapable of love." "I love you too," she replied, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "My arrogant, impossible, wonderful husband." "Husband," he repeated, as if testing the word. "I like the sound of that." "Good," Penny smiled, pulling him down for another kiss. "Because you're stuck with me forever now." "Forever," Nathaniel murmured against her lips. "I can't wait." 1 year later. The second Blackwood wedding was nothing like the first. Where the first had been a grand affair with hundreds of guests and society photographers, this one was intimate, just family and close friends gathered in the garden of their new home. Where the first had been performed for cameras and contracts, this one was performed for love. Penny wore a simple white sundress and carried wildflowers. Nathaniel wore jeans and a white button-down, looking more relaxed and happy than anyone had ever seen him. When he saw her walking toward him through the garden, his smile was so bright it could have powered the entire city. "Do you, Nathaniel Blackwood?" Charlotte officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. "Take Penelope to be your wife, to love and cherish, in all the adventures and quiet moments, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer. For as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Nathaniel said, his voice strong and sure. "Always and forever." "And do you, Penelope Blackwood?" Charlotte continued, grinning at her sister-in-law. "Take this reformed, arrogant ass to be your husband, to love and exasperate, in all his complicated glory, for as long as you both shall live." "I do." Penny laughed through happy tears. "Even when he's being impossible?" "Then by the power vested in me by the internet," Charlotte announced, I pronounce you husband and wife. Again. For real, this time. Now kiss and get on with your happily ever after." As Nathaniel kissed his wife, his real wife, his forever wife, under the afternoon sun, surrounded by the laughter and cheers of everyone they loved, Penny couldn't help but think about how far they'd come. A year ago, she had been a desperate woman accepting an impossible proposal from a man who claimed he couldn't love. Now she was married to her best friend, her greatest love, her perfect match in every way that mattered. "What are you thinking about?" Nathaniel murmured against her lips. "Contracts," she said, smiling. "Contracts." She nodded. "I was thinking that our first contract was for 6 months of fake marriage. But this one is for a lifetime of real love." "Best contract I ever signed," Nathaniel agreed, spinning her around in his arms. "The only contract you ever signed with your heart instead of your head," Penny corrected. "The only one that mattered," he said, setting her down and looking into her eyes with all the love and wonder that would carry them through whatever came next. And as they walked hand in hand into their future, surrounded by family and friends and the promise of all the beautiful, messy, real days ahead, both Penny and Nathaniel knew that some contracts are written not in ink, but in love. And those are the only ones that truly last forever. The end.